Hello, hello. I've got quite the video for you guys today. So what we're looking at is the new Chikuhodo Homare series brushes, also known as the Honor series, possibly also known as the KZ series, since all the brushes are labeled KZ1 through 8. So the Homare series released at the beginning of July, and I've been playing with them for a week. And I've got a review for you and some comparisons. So because this is going to be a very long video, I am going to be reading off a script, so I'll be looking off into the distance a bit. So the overview, the summary of this video will be, I'm going to do an overview of the brushes only, and it'll be my usual overview format where I show each brush and talk about what each brush can be used for and what they're good for. The second part will be a Chikuhodo comparison. So I'll be comparing the Homare series to the Chikuhodo Z series, the MK series, and the Takumi series. I won't be comparing it to the FO series since I don't own any of those, and I won't be comparing it to the Kiwami series either because I do not own that set of brushes. During this second part, I will be talking about inter-series analogs, so like what crossovers there are between the Homare series, the Takumi series, and the Z series. I'll be comparing their form, like their shape, their function, and their suitability for different skin types or makeup preferences. And I'll also be doing during that section an application demonstration. So say I have a couple brushes from the Takumi and the Z series that are similar to something in Homare. I'll be taking some makeup products, which I have here on hand, and doing comparative swatches during that section. And the last section will be a comparison to other brushes I own that seem immediately similar to the KZ brushes, or that I feel perform similarly. They either look very similar or they feel similar when I was running my hands through them. So those are the three parts of the video, and I'm going to get started with the overview. So a little bit of background. These brushes are made of Kazan Squirrel. So Kazan Squirrel is a type of brown squirrel, and you typically find this hair type in paint brushes, kind of like Kolinsky. It's very rarely used for makeup brushes, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. My only Kazan Squirrel brushes that I've had until I've gotten my hands on the Chikuhodo Homare series are from Hakuhodo, and I'll compare these brushes to the Hakuhodo Kazan Squirrel brushes in part 3, the other brand comparisons. I also have a couple other brown squirrel and red squirrel brushes to compare to in section 3. So the reason why I keep mentioning brown squirrel and red squirrel is, well, this is according to Christy's blog. She's got an amazing Instagram and a very informative blog. But Kazan Squirrel and brown squirrel are pretty much the same thing. And according to her blog post, I have it linked in the script. You can find it there. Brown squirrel is a type of red squirrel, but it's specific to the region of Kazakhstan. So it's kind of like how not all sable is Kolinsky, but all Kolinsky is sable. Similarly, not all red squirrel is Kazan squirrel, but all Kazan squirrel is a type of red squirrel. And also, according to her blog post, as well as according to Hakuhodo, Kazan squirrel is the finest squirrel hair in comparison to blue squirrel and gray squirrel. It's not directly comparable to Canadian squirrel because of its properties, and I'll do that comparison in part 3, other brand comparisons. So the properties that make Kazan squirrel so special is that the tips are supposed to be less fragile than blue squirrel and gray squirrel, despite feeling softer. They're finer in texture, though I can't show you on a microscope. I have looked at it under a loupe, and it does seem like the scales, the keratin scales on these hairs are softer. Or not softer, less like jagged and like stand-up-y. I'm losing my words right now. And then also brown squirrel or Kazan squirrel is supposed to have better elasticity So that means better snapback, more controllability, and stronger. It'll be a stronger blender, kind of like Canadian Squirrel, supposedly. And that's it about the hair, unless I'm forgetting something, which I'll probably remember later. So the handles, let's talk about the handles. These are made of, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Grandillo wood. Grandillo. It's a type of dense tropical hardwood from Central America. It has a medium fine grain size. My webcam's not the best, but as you can see, tight grain structure, beautiful wood. And it's also known as Mexican rosewood. And then because it's so dense, it does make a very nice sound when you hit it together. Like I'm just doing this right now. That's what it sounds like when you smack two handles together. Of course, this is somewhat jarring when you drop it, as I have, onto a marble countertop. But so far, they're fine. No chips or anything. You'll notice that the handles are flat bottomed and they have a little bit of a bevel around the edge. They can stand up, but because they're so top heavy, you see that wobble. It's really just for aesthetics. You can't really stand these up. Like in a brush cup, I guess they would stand up, but in a brush cup, a round bottom handle, it would make no difference. So these handles are, because I've gotten the question, how do these compare in feel to the Takumi and the Z series handles? So might as well do a quick comparison right here, right now. As you can see, the Z series, it's completely shiny from ferrule to handle. Takumi series is matte and matte. Homare series is glossy, shiny, and matte. So, but I think that question was in reference to the weight. Takumi is definitely the lightest. Homare is the heaviest. Actually, I should grab an analogous brush. Is the heaviest because of the handle, and then Chikuhodo's Z series is kind of in the middle. So as dense as this wood is, the handles and the brushes, or the handles of the brushes, are not weighted. So what I mean by that is some brushes, the handles, like especially the Hakuhodo, the handles are weighted with a core that makes the handles heavier and then balances with the brush head. This is top heavy. So handles are not weighted, though the density and the weight of the handle does feel nicer and more luxurious in comparison to, say, the Z series or the Takumi series. And then I'm sorry to people commenting. I'll get to them at the end of this section. Like I'll answer questions and address comments at the end of each section. So where was I in my script? It's a good thing I have this written out. Otherwise, I would get so lost. Okay, yes. So something that I found unique about these series is all of them have the same ferrule height and handle length. So if you like line them all up, they're all the black parts and all the wooden parts line up, and that just pleases me greatly. Of course, seamless transition, beautiful finishing. Most of these brushes, you will notice, have this slightly crimp finish to the end of the ferrule, and that contributes to how the brush feels density-wise. So that's a performance enhancing factor that I'll talk about a little bit later. And then as with most squirrel brushes, there's a little bit of a smell when it's damp. It goes away in a few washes. Like I've washed these twice so far, and I've definitely noticed that the smell has gone down, though there's still a little bit of it. And speaking of washing, none of these brushes I put brush guards on except for the Kz2. This one fluffed up a lot, like it was almost as wide as the Kz1, which is why I put a brush guard on it. And now it's a more, I guess, controlled, manageable shape and size. So, oops. I put personal favorites and rankings all the way up there. Okay. So we're going to start with the Kz1. This is their powder brush. And something about the Kz series, Homare series, Honor series, whatever you want to call these, is they have the names quite deeply engraved in, and they also have the name of the brushes. So that's something that's consistent with the Chikuhodo lines, is they have the brush title on them, so you know what you're working with. So this is the powder brush. It's a paddle, a very thick paddle. It almost looks round if you move it real fast, but it's an oval, a very fluffy oval. And as you can see, it has quite a bit of squish to it. So this is, they call it a powder brush, so of course it is suitable for powder, and because of the size, it's great for bronzer, body too, because look at how much this splays out when used with pressure. So this could definitely be a face brush and a body brush for all over. And if you've been looking for a squirrel brush, this is another option you have to look at. So as you can see, quite a big brush. If you prefer smaller brushes, this might not be for you. So this is on the big flat side. This is on the smaller side. And of course, when it's on the big flat side, it'll feel a little less resistance, but there's not much more if you switch to the other side. The thin profile, it has a little bit more bounce and a little bit more resistance, but I wouldn't use this for, say, blending out a very harsh face color. If anything, this is a soft wash brush. So if you have any finishing powders, like for example, the Hourglass Ambient, this is a perfect brush for it, because something like this, which is powdery, will kick up a lot. This one kind of like grabs and holds onto all the powder. So that's nice. I wouldn't use it with loose powder necessarily, because you're going to have to like really work the powder into the brush so it doesn't kind of poof everywhere and then apply it to your face. If we're talking about something like a pressed powder, this is the only one I have because I generally don't work with pressed powder. Almost completely useless for a harder pressed powder. So consider that when you're looking at a powder brush from the Homare line. I'll compare how the other Chikuhodo brushes do with pressed powder in section 2. Moving on, this is the cheek Kz2 the Cheek Brush. This to me is pretty much a small powder brush. Actually, for some people, it'd just be a straight powder brush. But this is a very large cheek brush. Very squishy. I mentioned a little earlier, I put in a brush guard. Otherwise, it would have been something like this width, like big. It would have been big, like almost as wide as the Kz1. So I put in a brush guard, just the usual little net. A little bit of background on how I wash my brushes. I wash them, I let them completely dry for a couple days, and then I put the brush guard on. I don't like putting the brush guard on when the brush is wet, because then it takes longer, or still damp, because then it takes longer for the brush to dry. I have a brush washing video that you can watch, where I can explain a little bit later on my brush washing techniques after the whole video is done. But as you can see, also a lot of spread to this one. This one would also make a good bronzer brush. Not so much a body brush, a little bit smaller, but still big enough to go down the neck, cross the face really fast, powder in the T-zone. So it's actually a little bit bigger than ideal for a T-zone powder brush. But of course, it feels very nice, very plush, like a soft pillow. So that's this one, Kz2, the powder brush. And just for a quick comparison in size, Kz1, Kz2. And they're both this thick, flat paddle shape. Next up, we have the Kz3. This is a cheek and highlight brush. Again, it's quite large in size. I wouldn't usually consider this for something like highlight, but it does have that tip. This is more of an area of effect highlight. So if you like the strobing powders, this will be good if you like those. Or under eye powdering. I wouldn't use it for contour, even though most highlight brushes I have double as contour brushes, unless you're doing like a very diffuse sculpting, like say you have one of those stripy blush and contour where it's in the same pan and they're right next to each other, you can just go back and forth across the pan and apply it like that, and that would give you an instant ombre effect for a contour and blush at the same time. So that's what I've come to conclude with this brush. Highlight, if you don't like highlighting the apples of your cheeks, you're gonna have to be very careful because that tip is very soft and not too firm. So you're not gonna get too intense of a highlight with this one, but you will get a pretty imprecise highlight. I hope I'm making this semi-clear. And for the people in the comments section, I will address your stuff at the end of section 1. So this is a round brush, round all the way around. The Kz4 is also round all the way around. This is the cheek brush. So where the Kz3 was a cheek/highlight brush, this is a straight cheek brush. So it's round, dome shape, has a little bit of a flatness at the top. It kind of tapers and then flattens out just a tiny bit before it comes to this dome. That's the density on this one. So I suppose now would be a good time to talk about the crimping. So what that crimping does is allows a smaller amount of hair to kind of splay out and cover more surface area without sacrificing firmness. So if it's not crimped, it'll feel less firm than a brush that is crimped, and then it'll give you a little bit more controllability as well. So this is a medium, if not medium large size cheek brush. So I would say I have pretty sizable cheeks, and this is me pressing pretty lightly. So if you like working in swirling motions, you have to keep in mind if your face is a little bit smaller, a little bit more like bone structure, and you like to emphasize that, this will be more of a just like blush wash brush. You can use it linearly or you can use it in circular motions like this. So pretty standard brush, pretty standard for a round cheek brush, that is. And like I mentioned, a little bit on the larger side. This is the Kz5. This is the highlight brush. So we're back to a flat paddle shape. However, unlike the other two paddle brushes, this is a thick paddle. This is actually kind of a pinched paddle. So this is probably the brush shape most of you are familiar with. So what you can do with this is, of course, under eye powdering and target T-zone powdering. Blush, of course, even though it says highlight brush. And this one is a true highlighter where you can like highlight more precisely. And because of this shape, I also like to use it for contour. So if you know anything about me and my obsession with the T5, this is quite similar to it, where you can use it for contour here, 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 down the nose, and if you like to just darken up the socket like there. So this would be, in my opinion, the most versatile brush of the bunch. And then you can see how it has that almost like diamond taper to it. It dried completely like this by itself. I mentioned a little earlier, none of these brushes were washed and dried with a brush guard, only the Kz2. So this is how it looks like bloomed after you've washed it out of the package. Okay, this is the Kz6. This is the eyeshadow brush. So something about the Homare series is they don't label the brushes like large, small, medium. Like the Z series, they label it like small, blending for the Z11, for example. All of the eye brushes are just eyeshadow brush. So this is the large brush. So if you're looking at my script and following along with it, you'll see that I put L in parentheses. That's what that means. So indeed, a large eye brush, large surface area wise, and quite thick. So this is my thumb. This is the brush. So what that looks like on the eye is this is an eye-based brush or an under-eye concealer setting brush. Something that you can do with brushes like these, and this is just brushes, big eye brushes in general, is applying a lot, packing on loose powder and then applying a loose pigment and then just taking another brush and then sweeping away the fallout and the loose powder afterwards. I'm demonstrating that with the Kz3 since it's pointed and it fits into the under eye the most effectively. Kz2 not so much. So this is this. You can turn it on its side and kind of get closer to the lash line like so, but it's still not going to be the most precise. However, this does make a fantastic eraser blending brush. So if you have a too harsh of a line, take this to the edge, blend it out. You'll have a nice diffused edge to it. Following that is the Kz7. This is the medium eye brush. So between small and medium, here is the size difference. Like the width of this is the profile. The width of the Kz7 is the profile of the Kz6. So pretty intense size difference there. And then this is your standard eye paddle brush. You've got a flat side and a little bit of an edge. So if you have smaller mobile lid like I do, you apply a little bit of a wash of color here, probably just a little bit above the crease. And you turn it on its side and then you work with the corners or closer to the lash line a bit like this. And because of that edge, you can get nice down here and kind of diffuse out the bottom corner a bit. So this is a Kz7. This is Kz8. So they're pretty much almost the same size with just the difference being in the shape. So the Kz8 is your pencil brush or detail brush, even though technically to me the Kz7 kind of already is a detail brush. This one's just more detail. So I call the Kz7 the medium of the series, and I call this one the small of the series. So got your little target there. This one has quite a nice spring back. Oh, I'm sorry, I completely forgot to show. So this one, as you can see, the spring back is a little slower but decent. And you can see a little bit, just ever so slightly bit of a lean to one way or another when I brush it. So that tells you something about the resilience of Kazan Squirrel. It's quite not as snapbacky as Canadian Squirrel is. And then so here's the spring back on this one, quite springy. Of course, the hairs are shorter and packed in there. And here's the spring back on the pencil, which is a really nice spring back because it goes, right back to where it started. It doesn't have a lean one way to a side or lean one way to another side. And this is your standard pencil brush. Definitely would not use this to smudge pencil liner or gel liner because it's squirrel and more delicate. So that's this brush. And like I'm jamming it into my socket as hard as I can right now and like really like poking into my eye. Like sorry if that looks disconcerting, but like you'd expect from high quality squirrel, this is completely non-pokey. So definitely good eye brushes to consider if you have very sensitive skin or just very sensitive skin around the eye. So that concludes part one. So if you just joined me, part one is the Kz's brush overview. And then I'm going to move on to part two, which is a comparison to other Chikuhodo brushes, namely the Z series and the Takumi series. I do not have the FO series or the Kiwami series. And then part three will be comparison to other brands of brushes. So before I move on to part two, I'm going to take a look at the comments, questions, and then answer some things and then move on. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you're excited for this. Squirrel eye brushes from Chikuhodo, enjoy using them, don't like having to wash them. Kazan Squirrel sounds like a better choice. So yes, you would be right about Kazan Squirrel being a better choice because Kazan Squirrel is used for paint brushes. I don't know if you were here for that section, and if you're just joining us, Kazan Squirrel is a hair commonly found in fine mop brushes for painting, same as Kolinsky. So kind of extrapolating a bit, that tells you that they're both pretty durable hairs and then a little bit more resilient than your usual gray and blue squirrel that you find. Got 5 in the mail on Tuesday. Love them. Yes, they are incredibly soft and great for sheer application. I think I should have mentioned that with every brush, but what you want to expect from Squirrel is sheer application. Didn't get the 2 largest and most expensive. Smart choice. Received your 5 Takumi series brushes. Oh, yay. Oh, congratulations and happy anniversary. I hope you're enjoying them. Okay, message held for review. Oh, okay. Yep. Kz4 during the Visage sale, but it was the first of the series to sell out. I can understand why. I can talk a bit more about it a little bit later in comparison to the other brushes, especially in comparison to the RC2, which is the one it looks most like. I don't know if you already have the RC2, Kathy, but definitely is comparable to that. Visage versus CD Japan. It really depends on the exchange rate, but I order from CD Japan because it's cheaper and also because I get points back that I can apply to future orders. CD Japan generally has lower prices. Okay, thank you for answering that. Shipping thresholds. Shipping on CD Japan, which is where I get most of my brushes and where I got these brushes, is free after 12,000 yen or $120. That's kind of pretty easy to hit with Fude. So something that I didn't mention that, and I might as well skip to my tip section now. Or no, I'll cover it after. So I'll cover that in my tip section after I'm done answering comments. Beautylish, I'm not sure these are available on Beautylish yet. Last I checked, I think it was last night, they aren't. CD Japan, 10% off, CD Japan, Visage, CD Japan, blah, 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 blah. Hakuhodo, da, da, da. Yeah, I'll be comparing to Hakuhodo later. I don't know which brush you're talking about. That's the $400 brush, but none of these are $400. The most expensive is the big one, of course. But all of the brushes put together cost, all 8 brushes for me with the exchange rate was less than $855. And then that's why I was going to mention tip-wise is U.S. customs duty start at $800. So a mistake I made was I put them all in one order. So if you're going to order all the brushes at once and be a crazy person like me, split your order into 2, and then you won't get hit with the customs duty that way. If your total is over $800 and you're shipping to the U.S., they will hit you with a fee. I think mine was something like $55. And then another tip I have for if you are going to get all the brushes, buy them separately, like a la carte, rather than get the set, because the set includes a brush roll. And, well, number one is you don't get a discount for buying them all together as a set. And number 2 is it's more expensive because the brush roll cost is factored in. So that concludes part 1. And then I'll talk about my personal favorites, rank them by my personal favorites, and then give you my recommendations ranking before I move on to part 2. So the difference between my personal favorites ranking and my recommendations ranking is I'm going to rank them by how I like them and what I like. And then recommendations is what I would recommend for the general or the layperson just getting into Fude, or if you're planning to buy these as presents, which ones you should probably pick because they'll be universal crowd pleasers. So I'm going to do personal rankings first. So personally, I would pick the 4. Okay, let me see. Right to left, right. Okay. 4, 5, 1, 3. So 4 is my first choice, 5, 1, and then 3. So 4, I just really like round cheek brushes. Yes, I did mention this is on a larger size, but usually I'm not being that precise with blush anyways. So that's why 4 is first. 5, I love versatile brushes. Highlight, contour, cheek, like paddle cheek blushing, under eye if I need it, down the nose, contour down the nose, highlight, This is just a great brush in general. So the reason why this is not first and this is first is because this one just feels so nice and plush. Like this one feels plush too, but in a different way. Like this one has more of a spring back to it. This one is more like floppy. So if you're looking for a luxury cheek brush, this would be it. And then honestly, the reason why this is second is because I still do prefer the Takumi T5 over this one, even though this is my second favorite of the series because it's so versatile. T1, this one just feels like a big hug by a soft pillow. It feels really nice. It's one of those brushes where when you use it to apply makeup, you're just going to want to continue running it over your face all day. So that's why this is third. This is fourth, because same deal. This just feels really nice to sweep all over your face. And then honestly, it's kind of hard to rank between these two, which one I like more. So they're just kind of 3 and 4, 4 and 3 together. And then so fifth place is a large eye brush. You probably saw this coming. Most people don't know what to do with them. I personally love them. So because having a good blending brush and a good base brush is kind of indispensable in how I do my makeup. So your mileage will vary, but this is fifth. Eighth, the good old pencil brush. Or eighth. Sixth, Kz8, the good old pencil brush. And then the Kz7, the medium eye brush. The reason why the 8 comes before the 7 is because there's pretty much nothing the 8 can't do that I can do with the 7. And the additional thing the 8 can do is I can do the very, very fine highlight. This can technically do it too because of that fine tip, but the 8 is ever so slightly more precise. And then lastly is the 2. You probably kind of saw this coming. It's one of those brushes where it's like, I have other things like it that I like better. So you're probably wondering, why does the Kz3 rank above the Kz2? And that is because of the slightly more versatile shape. And because it has this round shape, it has slightly more buffering, so it has a slightly better spring back and snappiness to it. So again, my personal rankings and favorite is the Kz4, followed by the Kz5, followed by the 1, then the 3, then the 6, then the 8, then the 7, and lastly the 2. So now I'm going to talk about recommendations ranking. So this is going to be a much more in general to suit general taste ranking. So I would still say the Kz4 would probably be most beloved by most people. You can hand this to almost anybody and they'll know what to do with it once they start playing around with it a bit. And this is kind of deviates from what I would normally do, but the Kz6 is such a good blender, especially for a squirrel brush. If someone's sensitive, they will love this brush for blending and just applying base and then for doing work under the eye. I know it's not the most versatile brush, but I think it's second best brush and definitely a standout in the series. And because another thing that affects my general recommendations ranking is I know most people will probably be more drawn to the eye brushes because if you're worried about washing them, eye brushes, you kind of like wash them less. So, and then I also use eye brushes with like more dry products. So they tend to get gunked up and require washing less. If I just like run them on a towel in between products, that tends to clean them off very well for the next time. So that's why the third brush is also an eye brush. The Kz8 Pencil Brush Detail Eye Brush. You'll probably love this. And then the person you give it to will probably know what to do with it. And if you're new to brushes, you'll probably know exactly what to do with this brush. Then we have the 5. Whoop! Okay, didn't drop that completely. So then we have the 5. This is your standard paddle brush. So again, probably a crowd favorite. This will be a fantastic brush for anybody, really. So why I didn't put this one first and this one where the 5 is. So this, or no, wait, yeah. So why I didn't put the 5 first and the 4 is because the 4 is just plain luxuriously feeling. If you're gonna get a squirrel brush, you want that luxury feeling. So that's why this is first. And then this is later on, because there's a dozen brushes you could get in this paddle shape. But there's only so many you can get in this round shape. And then we have the 1. So again, this is in the luxury recommendation. If you're looking at these brushes, you're probably looking for something that feels amazing. And then this one feels, well, amazing. And then again, I couldn't really distinguish between this 3 and the 1. If you want a squirrel powder brush, how these rank for you will depend on which size you prefer. So the 1 versus this 3. If you're looking for a squirrel powder brush, these are interchangeable in ranking, depending on what you're looking for. And also what you normally use. And then we have the 2. So why do I like the 3 more than the 2? Again, because of shape and because of the greater resilience. So you can see the 3 splays out less. It's more controllable. Like heck, the 1 splays out almost less than the Z2, and then the Kz2 does. The 1 just splays out more because it's already bigger to start with, but the 1 has more resilience than the 2. And that personally, to me, feels nicer, and I think most people will enjoy the slightly greater resilience too. Bringing up the end of the pack is the Kz7. It's not a bad brush. Like, don't get me wrong, this is not a bad brush, but there are so many other brushes you could get. And I have, if you're looking at my list, there's a bunch of brushes I have to compare to the Kz7, or yes, the Kz7. So it's dead last, not because it's a bad brush, but because it's the least unique. And grab something. I hope you have a drink or a snack. I'm starting to get a little parched, and I knew I would since I tend to do long videos. So there's my tea. Not spilling any tea. Okay, answering the questions and comments real quick before I move on to part 2. Okay. Hello, I'm glad you caught me live. You want them all eventually? Okay, so if you want them all eventually, I just gave the ranking for which ones you should possibly prioritize and my reasoning for that. So of course, your ranking priorities will probably differ from mine. They've been shipped. Okay, goody goody. Kz4 comparison to Sonia G Soft Cheek. The Sonia G Soft Cheek was actually a brush I initially pulled for comparison. However, I put it back, like it didn't make my comparison lay up over here because it's completely round on the top. So as you can see, if the Kz4 has a little bit of flatness, and the taper starts lower compared to the Sonia G Soft Cheek. The Sonia G Soft Cheek has a slightly different taper and a more dome shape, and it's also made of gold. So I declined to include it in the comparison in part 3. So you're absolutely right about that. You want this collection, doesn't make sense as you have many duplicates. I mean, you can always get them a la carte, just one brush or another. Honestly, the brush I think that has no duplicate is the Kz6, which is why it ranks so high in my general recommendations list. And then I'll talk about how it compares to the Z5 shortly. Spoiler, it doesn't really compare to the Z5. Where did I get the brush holders? I got mine off Amazon. It's called the Kit Plus Hooks brush bar. I'm not sure if it's on there anymore, but of course Kit Plus Hooks has their own website you can look at them for. Kz5 Blend to Nothing. The Kz5 it's not a big, strong blender. So if you have like over applied blush, I would reach for the Kz5 over, say, the Kz4 to really diffuse it, only because the Kz5 is more precise. So you can really lick the edges away. As far as blending ability goes, like if I like really like messed up, I would probably take the Kz4 to like really diffuse it out. The problem with the Kz4 is because it is so big, when you like press it, you might end up with imprecise color everywhere, and then you might kind of have a muddy mess. So the Kz5 would generally be better for blending stuff out. Neither of these brushes will really blend things into oblivion unless you really, 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 really work at it. But overall, they are pretty strong blenders for Squirrel. Okay. Oops, I lost my place. As far as the Z one goes, I'll get to that shortly in the part 2 comparison. It's not like the KZ one is not like the Z one at all. It's more like the MKs and the Z9, if anything. So, oh yeah, K6. K6, yeah, you would run the risk of the KZ6 blending to nothing. How they compare to Gray Squirrel, I'll get to that in a bit with the Z series. Get to that in a bit. Almost got the K2. Denser K series or Z series, again, that'll be answered in part 2 where I compare to the Takumi and the Z series. Would the 6 be a good replacement for the Real Techniques setting brush? I honestly don't have any experience with that brush. I know what it looks like, but I've never played around with it before or used it, so I'm sorry I can't answer that question. FO series or KZ series? I'm sorry, I don't have the FO series. Okay, part 2. Finally, I am comparing each brush to their each KZ brush to their Z series or to Takumi series counterparts. We're going to start with the KZ1. All the way over here. So, kind of mentioned briefly already, the KZ1 is a very thick paddle brush. What does the Kz brush look like in Gray Squirrel? It probably looked like the MK2. As you can see, it's just a little bit smaller, but they both have that very thick paddle shape. Slightly flatter top on the KZ, of course, but then you look at the footprint and it's pretty much the same shape. The KZ1 does fluff out a little bit, which I found odd because Kazan Squirrel hair is supposed to be more, I guess, firm than Gray Squirrel, but machining-wise, they both have that crimped ferrule. So it seems to me that Kazan Squirrel actually fluffs up more than Gray Squirrel does. So if we're like looking at the pat test, Kazan Squirrel does splay out more. So what's said about Kazan Squirrel hasn't really been greatly reflected in what I've experienced with Kazan Squirrel in comparison to Gray Squirrel. So here's the snapback. Pretty much the same. The KZ Squirrel actually feels a little softer and a little less dense. That might be what the difference in the splaying is. Like this feels less dense to me than the MK2. Like ever so slightly. It's more like a feel thing. You can't really see it. It's a feel. So, and then as I've mentioned before, I think the MK1 and MK2 are pretty much the same brush. Thus, the KZ1 pretty much gets duplicated by the MK2 as well. So MK2 is the cherry blossom, MK1 is the peony, KZ1 on here. So all of them are thick, flat, fat paddles. So that's that paddle shape. So MK1 and MK2 aside, this is how it compares to the Z9. As you can see, the Z9 has a much more definitive taper shape, not to mention it's longer. It's also much firmer for sure. As you can see. slower ripple, faster ripple, much firmer. So Z9 is not a dupe for me in Gray Squirrel. MK1 and MK2 are what I would consider to be Gray Squirrel dupes. So I said a little earlier, Z1 is not at all like the KZ1, and this is why. Z1 is round, Z1 is round, KZ1 is oval. Yes, they are both kind of thick like this, but once you turn it on its side, it's different. Of course, you can always use this in a round blending motion like you can with the Z1. The thing is, because the Z1 is round, you have a lot more buttress or buffer hair. So this feels a lot more firm than the KZ1. So if you're looking for a firm like finishing brush, like you've applied all your makeup, you just want a final blend, Z1 is your brush. The Z9 is slightly firmer than the Z1. I've done Chikuhodo powder brush series comparison. So Z9 is the firmest, Z1 is second firm, followed by the KZ1, and then, followed by the MK1, MK2, and then the KZ. So here we have the rankings from most firm squirrel brush to least firm. So Z9, Z1, MKs to, or MK1 and 2 to Kazan Squirrel at KZ1. The final brush I have is not even, I guess, really should be considered a comparison, but I know people are going to ask about it. The MKMO, the MKUM, and the MKKO. So everything after the two letters after just denote the graphic on the handles. So this is the MKMO, same brush head on the other ones I mentioned. Again, it's a thick paddle, but it's completely different in finish and machining. It doesn't have the crimped handle, and then this one is packed definitely much more dense, so you can see the spring back on this one. So that's how that compares. And then I'm going to do a product comparison, but I can't really do a finishing powder, so I'm going to do it with a bronzer. So I'm just going to do it with the MK2 and the KZ1 because the other brushes, as I've said, don't really compare. I'm going to be doing it with a bronzer, this color. And let me check my notes to see if I'm missing anything before I move on to the comparative swatches for this brush. Okay, so in general, with the comparative swatches, I tried to pick something that's like high pigment. And the swatches won't be ideal because obviously body skin is different from face skin, but I'm not going to apply makeup and take it off over and over with the different brushes on my face. So this is the best you're going to get. Sorry. And let me see if I'm missing anything. No. Okay. So I'm going to use it with this darkest one. I'm going to apply it with the flat side. As you can see here. I don't know if you can really see that. Okay. Note to self, I should get a better webcam. Okay. You can just see ever so slightly. With there. And then again. So that's where I applied there. I'm going to apply here. As you can see, very subtle effect. Like it almost just warms the skin rather than darkens it. But you can see how this area is like slightly more diffused. This is slightly darker. And just for the heck of it, let's do the Z9, which Sonia calls the queen of bronzer brushes. So as you can see, KZ1, MK2, Z9. Okay. KZ1 out of the way, and there's going to be a little bit more delay in this section too because I am going to be wiping off my arm with Bioderma between each brush so I can refresh it. I'll be going through a lot of cotton pads today. I'm going to let my arm dry, and I'm going to talk about the Kz2. So this is your Kz2. This is the Kz2. It's most similar to the Z8, but I say most similar, it's not a dupe, not by a long shot, because you can see the size difference. This is also much more loose feeling than the Z8. This is the Z8, what it looks like dried without a brush guard. Without a brush guard, dried, and then put in a brush guard. So I mentioned at the beginning, this one's like much more fluffy and much more like poofed out if you don't put in a brush guard. They look kind of the same footprint-wise, but functionally, not quite the same. So let me follow up by showing you the, Kz2, Z8, and then this is the Z4. This is like the smaller fat paddle brush. So we got big, medium, small here, except for big is made of Kazan Squirrel, and medium and small are made of gray squirrel. So this is again where I said, I don't know if it's because the brush is much less loosely packed than the gray squirrel ones, but the gray squirrels feel more resilient in the spring back sense. So you can see how fast this one jumps back. This one jumps back even faster. This one takes its sweet old time, and you can see the little bit of a lean after I run my fingers through it. Z8 has a little bit of a lean too, but otherwise it mostly returns to the same shape, and that's the resilience I'm talking about. The other resilience refers to how durable the hair is, and because Kazan Squirrel, Brown Squirrel is used for paintbrushes, I do believe it to be more durable in the long run than Gray Squirrel. However, if you're looking for a controllable brush, Kz2 might not be your brush. If you're looking for like a small bronzer brush, this might be good for you. So this is a Z8 on the side and the Kz2 on the side. And the Z8 is already what I would consider to be a larger cheek brush. That's how those two are. Alrighties. Kz3. This one doesn't really have an analog. And then, okay, so for the Kz1 and Kz2, I didn't show any in the Kumi series because the Kumi series doesn't have any brush like them. So that stands true for the Kz3 as well. Instantly, you might think of the Z2, but you can see from the size difference, it's like big, small. The Z2 is infinitely more suited for a highlight brush, and that's reflected in the name. It's called just the highlight brush. The Kz3 is called the cheek and the highlight brush. And like I said, it's a area of effect highlighter. Decently good for under the eye, how I've been finding myself using it, as I mentioned a little earlier. I'll use another brush to pack on loose powder, apply a loose pigment, then use this mop brush to just sweep and flick it away. Kz1 doesn't work so well for that because it's so big. Kz2 doesn't work so well for that because it's really loose and floppy. Kz3 works wonderfully for that. And of course, good for blush, but you can't really use this in a round way. You just kind of have to like sweep it on like you're painting it on. Kz1, good for contour and highlight. Kz3, good for blush and highlight. Definitely wouldn't try to use this with contour. So there's that. Oh, I didn't do the comparison swatches for Kz2. My bad. So it completely skipped my mind to do it because these are so dissimilar, but I'm going to do it really quickly anyways. I'm going to use this sleek palette. I'm going to use this red one. As you can see, Squirrel, super light. Like you're watching me run this brush over and over and over to build up the pigment. So definitely no clown cheeks with this one. And let me tell you, this stuff is really potent. If you've never used any of the sleek blush by threes before, okay, this was just one swipe back and forth in the pan. Another swipe. I think I did 2 swipes. This is the Z8. As you can see, it's building up faster than with the Kz1. I didn't run it back and forth in the pan as much. And then something that you'll notice right here, right now, you see how this one looks more red and this one looks more golden? That's because with this blush, it's a red matrix powder with like golden gleams. So the Kazan Squirrel has picked up more of the matte pigment, and then the gray squirrel has picked up more of the glitter pigment. However, this I attribute to the fact that the gray squirrel brush is denser, so it's going to pick up glitter and shimmer better. So that's this effect. Again, take a brief intermission, wipe this off, and dry my arm off. And then we're going to do, so that was the Kz2 comparison, the Kz3 comparison. Where did I lay that brush down? There we are. Not really comparable, but here it goes anyways. We're going to be using, what blush do I want to use for that one? Let's use the pink one. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Gonna do here. Gonna pick up some more pigment since that's not really translating. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like it's showing really pink on my arm, but it's not showing up on the camera. Like when I was testing these out, I didn't have to do it quite with so heavy-handed. So there's that. You can see how long it took up to build the pigment there. And you can see, again, the difference. So in general, the denser Z brushes with gray squirrel will deposit more of the shimmer as well as the base matrix color of the blush, while the Kazan Squirrel, because they are looser, pick up more of the matrix and deposit less of the shimmer. So that was Kz3 on the bottom, Z2 on the top. And for people who've just joined, this is part 2. I'm doing all the comparative swatches and comparisons with the Z series and Takumi series. It's going to take a bit longer than the first section because I'm cleaning my arm off between each product. Moving on, we've got the Kz4, your slightly flat-topped round dome brush. So people who are familiar with Chikuhodo are instantly going to draw a connection to the T4. Both of these brushes have been washed and dried without the use of a brush guard. This one's slightly dirty. I don't think any of that pigment is going to affect the swatches, so I think that's fine enough. So as you can see, they both have that slightly flat top shape. T4 a little bit more. Here's the size of them in comparison. And this one, as you can see, has a little bit of a lean when I run my fingers through it. This one snaps right back to the shape it started at. So, time to compare. And then because this is a round brush, it's denser, so I'm going to be using it with a harder formula. So the formulas I've picked to demonstrate the brushes with are ones that I have and I like. So, and ones that I think the brushes should be able to handle. So this brush should definitely be able to handle a harder baked formula like this, or like a really hard pressed product. I'm blanking on any of them at the moment. So here we go. It's showing up on my arm, but not on the camera. So that was one dip. I'm going to do another dip just so you can see. And then this cheek pop has a little bit of a sheen, but the Kazan Squirrel brushes in general, I've noticed, apply things more matte. So this is Cola Pop, the darkest cheek pop I believe Clinique has currently. I do, in answer to your question, sorry, because that just caught my eye. I will be comparing these brushes to the Maquillé White Canadian Squirrel brushes by Koyudo in part 3. That's going to be a little bit of a time from now because, well, I'm still only halfway through part 2. So there you can see the difference. So this is the Kz4, and this is the T4. Kz4, T4. In my opinion, the Kz4 absolutely blows the T4 away in the finish. Like, I don't know if it's picking up on camera, but the T4 is a little bit more splotchy than the Kz4 application. And then, like, this is not a splotchy brush in general, but it's just that for the amount of effort you put into blending something like this away, the Kz4 is just amazing, which is another reason why it was first in my general recommendations. I really should put these notes in my spreadsheet, but it doesn't occur to me when I'm writing it until I'm talking. Then I remember, oh, I should have done that. Okay, and then finally we have the Kz5 Highlight Brush. Instantly reminds me of the T5, and then you realize, oh, T5 is much bigger, but they both have that diamond taper shape. Ta-da! T5 is much bigger. So how they compare, here's the tip, here's the tip. And as you know, I use both of these for contour, both of these for highlight. This one I can use for contour down the nose. This one, oh, definitely not gonna work. So let's use this with some contour powder. I'm not sure this is gonna show up, so let's go. Oops, I still have a little bit, okay. Okay, let's take the contour powder here. Slight shadow you can see. Really working it. Okay, there's that. Here's this. And then I'm using my usual Kevin Aquan duo. There's that. Okay. Stronger with less time spent going back and forth. More subtle with more time going back and forth. So if you're looking for a quick contour, T5 will be it. Kz5 is a little slower. I'm going to clean these brushes off on a towel really quick and then show you how they perform with highlighter. And then for highlighter, I think I'm going to use a softer pressed formula. So this is a Joy, whatever, Ice. See if you can get that gleam. Actually, no, let's do this on the back of my hand. You can see there. And then let's do it with the T5. Much, much stronger. Okay, I really need better lighting. But what it looks like to me is this has a stronger sheen. The T5 has given a stronger sheen, but interestingly enough, the KZ has deposited more of the chunky glitter, and that's because Goat will kind of let it fall away, but Squirrel is great for glitter. So that's why that's like that. So even though this is more, the T5 gives a more polished and shiny finish, the Kz5 gives a more glittery finish. And this is not a glittery highlight by a long shot. But that's the effect of the hair. Excuse me one moment. Had to move my tea closer. It's starting to get parched. I normally don't talk this much. Okay. I'm going to be showing the Kz6, and the reason why this ranks so high on my general recommendations is because there's no equal to this brush, like none whatsoever. It looks similar to the Z5, but it behaves completely differently. Two things you'll notice. The Kz6 has a little bit of a lean, so this is softer, as in like more plush. This is much more springy, and that's because this is more, the Kz6 is less dense than the Z5. However, both will blend your eyeshadow into oblivion. The Z5 does have a little bit more of a taper, but it doesn't really functionally affect anything. The reason why I say they are different is, and you'll see in a second when I'm applying swatches and blending out product, how they work. So let's go with this. So as you can see, because of that Z5 shape, you get this automatic blended edge if you're just going back and forth wiping like that. With the T5, you get a little bit less of that blended edge, see? And because of that flat top, that more rounded top, that less tapered top, you get more concentration of pigment right away. So what this means for when you're applying eyeshadow to the eye is, with this brush, I dip it in and I did my eye makeup with the T6 today. I laid the base down. I applied it like this first, and then distributed the pigment across both eyes, and then I blended it up in small circles. With the T5, how I use this brush is I use it upside down, because you see near the tip it's the strongest, and then where it tapers on the side it's lighter. With this brush, I use it upside down like this, and I go back and forth like this. So the techniques I use for these brushes are completely different, even though they look pretty similar. So let's clean these brushes off and then show you how they blend eyeshadow out. So for that experiment, I am going to, I guess, use finger swipes. I'm gonna take this VisiArt palette. And then, as I mentioned before, this is an imperfect demonstration, imperfect experiment. because face skin does not behave the same. Oops, wrong color. Does not behave the same as body skin, but I'm not gonna keep reapplying and erasing makeup off my face. So this is what you get. Okay. Gonna blend these two together first with the KZ1. And then using the KZ1, Kz6, and then the Z5. So as you can see the difference, the Kz5 is definitely better at blending colors together. There you go. And then the did I say Kz5? Kz1, no, Kz6, and then the Z5. I'm starting to get delirious with all the Z's and numbers. So this one is better at blending the colors together. So if you have two areas of color, using this one to blend them together works better. And then as you can see with the Kz6, it kind of almost wipes it away. Like you have that like kind of like bald patch in between. So that's why I say these brushes look similar, but they work completely differently. So depending on what you're looking for, I wouldn't say the Z5 is better than the Kz6 or vice versa. It really depends on how you do your makeup every day and what functions you are looking for. And then I'll get to the comments after in two more brushes after I finish the swatches for the last two brushes. All hail Bioderma. Okay. T7, Kz7. Same thing. Not really the same brush. You can't really compare them, but hey, let's do it anyways. So you have a more flat tip on the T7, a little bit more surface area. You have more point on the T7. On the Kz7. Kz7 is thinner, definitely fatter, and then you look at the points. And then these brushes, the difference between them is also best demonstrated by swatches. And for this one, I'm going to be doing a dark color. So just to show how the shape difference between these two brushes, not to mention the hair type, affects how these brushes work, I'm going to be using several different colors. I'm going to be starting with a dark color and showing you how these brushes apply and blend it out. Right? Color on the tip, that's how this blends out. Dark color on the tip, that's how that applies. So we can see this effect pretty clearly. The reason why the Kz7 applies so much darker is because it's shorter and denser. So that's the Kz7 on top. I should have done it on the bottom. And then the T7 on the bottom. Crap. Okay. Anyways, better blender brush. If you're better application and blender brush in one. So you can just go straight into your color, apply it, and then blend it straight out. This one you're going to have a tough time doing it with because it's going to apply it and be so dark right off the bat. You're going to have difficulty blending it out unless you take another brush and then you use that brush to blend it, blend the edges. like that. And I'm going to clean this off again and then show you how precise or not it can be. So this has a much more rounded tip. This has a more chiseled, sculpted tip. And this makes a difference when you're applying to areas like around the eye. This will give you a very fuzzy halo. This will give you a much tighter line. So do this. That's the thinnest line you can get with the T7. This is the thinnest line you can get with the KZ7. So about 60%. And then I'm just using the tip with the slightest bit of pressure. You can get a very thin line, like right there, see? And the last thing I can say for this brush is because of this smaller, lesser width, you can use it to apply stuff to the mobile lid if you have a mono lid or a smaller mobile lid like I do. This one, it's going to be bigger and cover a lot more. Sorry, someone tried to call me. Busy. I'm working with brushes. I'm busy. Okay, last up, the Kz8 Pencil Brush. Very springy. This is the Chikuhodo Z10. Also very springy, but less defined tip. And then we have, I'm kind of embarrassed to show this, the Z10. So we have Kazan Squirrel Z8 here. We have Gray Squirrel Z10 here. And then we have Goat Psychoho T8 here. Did I call that the T10? Okay, no, this is the T8. So as you can see, they're pretty much similar. I would say that shape-wise, the Kz8 is the smallest, and it has a point most like the T8. So again, this is one of those brushes where the difference is best seen in how they apply things. So for that one, I'm going to use, again, this dark color, and I'm going to apply with just the tip. Like if I was applying something to my under eye. Very delicate little line. So that was the KZ. Now I'm going to do the Z. So you can see right away the difference. The Z requires more blending, so I applied it with the same pressure and the same movements. The Z will require more blending, and that's because of the hair type. Gray Squirrel is less resilient than Kazan Squirrel, so it looks just a little bit more splotchy. Finally, we're going to do the T8. There you go. So what can we surmise from this? The Kz8, the T10, and the T8. Wait, let me say that again. Kz8, Kz10 and the T8. This one, the KZ, is obviously the best out of the pencil brushes, and that's also and there's a reason why it ranks pretty high in general recommendations. So if you're going to get a pencil brush out of all the Chikuhodo brushes, I would definitely get the KZ. Assuming you don't use gel or pencil liner a lot and you're trying to smudge. And that concludes part 2, the comparisons between Chikuhodo's other brushes. This is a really off one, but someone's going to ask. This is the difference between the T1 and the KZ1. They have nothing in common besides the fact that they're big, fat, oval, fluffy paddles. Okay, so I'm going to answer questions and then move on to part 3, which is where I will talk about Red Squirrel, Kazan Squirrel brushes from other brands, not Chikuhodo, and do a comparison. So looking at the comments first, answering some questions before I move on so I don't have a big backlog of them. Okay. I answered that. I have no idea where I was in this. How dense does the hair feel compared to the Z series? Overall, the KZ series face brushes are less dense than the Z series, and that can be seen in the swatches. Let's go on to K2, which is sensor K series, C series. I already answered that. Went to 6. Nope. Oh, I answered those. I'm not going to tell you my real name. Nope. Sorry. Which series of brushes do you own? Which brand is your true favorite? Ooh, that's actually really hard. I might answer that someday in a general brushes video. I haven't gotten around to the FO series. I'm not sure why. There's just some sort of stymie I have there. But eventually. Is the Kz5 better at blending than the Z11? I wouldn't assume you mean the Kz6 better than the Z11. The Z11 is better at blending than the Kz5, if we're talking about application. The Z11 is unique in that, for those who don't know, it's unique because it's a round gray squirrel blending brush. And then I initially got that just to complete the Z series, but I found out that it was really good for application and blending out right away. So that's unusual because gray squirrel is normally seen as very non-resilient. However, I would say that the Z11 is better for application and blending than the Kz5 simply because this brush is so big. The Z11 is more controllable because it's a more familiar shape. As far as direct comparison go, you can't really compare a flat brush like this to a round brush like that because the surface area you're working with is completely different. So the Z11 is technically more precise, which is why it's better, but the Kz5 is better as an eraser because it's stronger and because it has that greater surface area. Rebby, I'm sorry you lost the stream, but you could always watch the playback. You think you need to complete your Z series collection now? Definitely give my Z series overview a watch and I guess scan the rest of my videos for wherever I use the Z series brushes. Z series is on your Christmas wish list. Honestly, there are a lot of brushes here in the KZ series that I think should be on your Christmas wish list. And then also, because I'm going to get the question, here's the large eye brush from the Takumi series. Here's the large eye brush from the KZ series. They have nothing in common. I use this more as a face brush than I use as an eye brush. This is my contour brush, nose contour, eye socket contour, highlight brush. This one, you can't really contour. You can contour this eyelid. You could contour the nose. It'd be a bit strong. You could highlight down the nose. It'd be a bit strong. This one has a weaker highlight down the nose, which is why I do use it for that. So the large eye brush in the T6 series is suitable as a face brush. Large eye brush in the Kz series, not so much. Okay, let me check my notes to see what I can do, and then, or see what I have left to do, and then move on. Please excuse my super gross T tag. It's kind of come off over the side and then gone into there. Okay. Before I wrap up section 2, which series is best suited for which functions? Well, overall, the T series, because they're made of Chikuhodo goat hair, is going to be more versatile overall formulation-wise. So you're going to have an easier time using them with very hard-baked products or very hard-pressed products. And then cream products, you could get away with using it for cream products for the denser brushes like the T4 and the T5. Cream products are completely out of the question, I would say, for Kazan Squirrel, even though they are liquid capable, because the series overall is just very fluffy and loose. They're not super dense and probably would not handle cream products well. You could get away with using cream products for these guys, but I think you might want to look into goat for cream products before you go into these guys. I would only use these for cream products if you are very, 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 very sensitive around the eyes. I unfortunately can't give feedback on that because my skin is not that sensitive. So that's where I stand on that. Z series and Kz series overall are going to be best used for powder and sheer makeup. As you saw when I was doing the swatches, I had to really work at it to build the pigment up. And part of that is because my camera sucks. I'm a bit washed out from the lighting. So like, even though it was showing up like that's where I would stop on my skin, I had to keep going and going and going to get it to show up enough for the camera. But in general, you're going to get a very, very nice finish with the Kz brushes. Like for the ones that have a direct equivalent to the Z brushes, I prefer the Kz brushes more, even though they are less dense and they feel less plush and luxurious. Yeah, I guess that kind of covers it for which brushes suit what functions, what skin type. And then I've mentioned already the Kz series to me feel the most luxurious. If you're going at it from a looks-wise perspective, they're kind of like luxury, rustic because of that wood. So I guess outdoors chic, sort of. Simply because they're not completely, oops, nope, not that one. Not completely glossy like the Z series are. And then you can definitely go watch my Z series overview and my Takumi series overview if you want more information about those brushes alone. Okay, moving on to the other brands comparison. I'm going to start with the Kazan Squirrel brushes from Hakuhodo. So Hakuhodo offers 3 Kazan Squirrel brushes. I own 2 of them. I own their G5518 powder brush and the G5524 eyeshadow brush. There's a smaller version of this called the G5524. So there's a smaller version of this called the G5558. That's a little bit smaller. I got the larger eye brush because I like large eye brushes. And then if you're interested in both these brushes, I mentioned them in my Hakuhodo top 10. So definitely go check that out if you are interested in these brushes. So 2 things. Oh. Yes, let's drop everything. Where did my notes go? Hair comparison. Through my poor quality camera, you can't really tell, but the Hakuhodo Kazan Squirrel is slightly lighter and more golden in the tips. So maybe if I hold it farther away, you can see, maybe not. Slightly lighter than these guys here. And even if I hold it to an equivalent size brush, because sometimes the density can affect the color of the brush, Hakuhodo is definitely lighter to my eyes. As for how they feel, well, this is going to be a bit difficult because the Hakuhodo brush, this little powder brush, is definitely a lot denser. So I would say that they feel the same, but because the shapes are so different, you really couldn't go wrong if you end up loving Kazan Squirrel getting all the brushes. I know, a little insane, but they're just really something that you have to experience. So I would say if you turn the Kz5 on its side, it'd be the most similar to the Hakuhodo G5 but it still doesn't come close in density. Like this one, I like using it as a very precise blush brush. This is the blush brush from the Kz. It displays out a lot more and will be a lot less controllable and a lot less precise. So if I was going to apply makeup with it, so let's use the Swatch. This is Pencil. Load it up. Let's use this part of my arm. So you're seeing how much, okay, like this is already like too much blush for me if I was doing it for my face, but it's not showing up on camera. So I'm going to keep going until it shows up. So note how long it's taking me to show up on camera. And then note how long it takes me to do it with this brush. And then this is purely because of density. Right away. So if you're that type of person where I just want to get my makeup on, get out the door, this denser Hakuhodo Kazan Squirrel brush will definitely be the one for you. If you really like layering makeup or using highly pigmented products like that sleek blush by 3 I used, the Kazan Squirrel from Chikuhodo, those brushes will be better for you. And as you can see, finish is the same. This is just less dense less pigmented for the time being. And then this is a good brush. The Hakuhodo one is a good brush for blending out the edges if they end up too dense. So, but you don't have to get this one. It's just a nice one, so I thought I'd mention it. This baby, the G5524. It's a pointed bullet brush. You might not know how to use it right away. It took me a little bit of experimentation to figure out how to do it too. I mentioned at 10:45 in my Hakuhodo top 10, I show you how I use it. This is honestly a brush that I think would be a great supplement to the Kz series, because this is a true blending brush that can really do a lot of things. So I just really, really love this brush, and I highly recommend it. If you really end up loving the Kazan Squirrel brushes from Chikuhodo, I recommend getting this brush, just period. So as far as application and blending goes, let me show you the blending power. So I'm going to take some more dark color. I keep going for the purple for some reason. So big fat swatch of it. This is the blending of the Kz6. This is the blending of the 5524. Takes much less effort to blend something out to nothingness. This one takes a lot more effort to really blend it out. Since I'm at it, I might as well do the T5. Where is it? Here we go. Here's the T5 blending out the middle section. So in terms of nothingness blending, Hakuhodo is definitely the strongest. Z5 second strongest, and then the Kz6 has the least power in blending out, but it still works as a nice blending brush because you can see that nice diffused edge. T5, a little bit stronger of an edge, but blends out faster. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. Clean my arm off. Okay, next up, oops, nope, okay. Next up, I mentioned before at the very beginning how Kazan Squirrel is a type of red squirrel. So I have a couple of red squirrel brushes here to compare the hair quality of. So I mentioned red squirrel. Kazan Squirrel is red squirrel from a region-specific standpoint. So I have 2 red squirrel brushes from Koyudo, 1 red squirrel brush from a Chinese brand. This is, I think it's Chin. I don't remember, and it's not branded on the brush. Whatever, this one was limited edition, and I have a red squirrel brush from Kz8. So starting with these 2, this is the limited edition red squirrel cheek brush from a couple years ago by Koyudo. And then this is a more recent limited edition red squirrel eye brush from Koyudo. Again, this one has maki on the handle. That's what makes it special and why I got it. So these brushes, Koyudo makes red squirrel brushes that come up once in a while. They're limited edition. They always usually go pretty fast. But in case you were ever interested in them, the difference between Kazan Squirrel and red squirrel is, okay, you can probably see here that the red squirrel is actually much more red and less dark brown than the Kazan Squirrel. As far as feel-wise, the Kazan Squirrel feels softer to me than the red squirrel. Flop-wise, the Kazan Squirrel is about the same. And then this one's leaning because it has less buffer. So that's how these are. Like the Kazan Squirrel feels noticeably softer than the red squirrel on this cheek. I couldn't tell the difference between the Kazan Squirrel between Hakuhodo and the Chikuhodo though. But between Kazan Squirrel and Kazan Squirrel, there's no difference that I can feel. Between Kazan Squirrel and red squirrel, I can feel the difference. For the cheek brush. For the eye brush, you can see it has a lot of bend as well, just like the Kazan Squirrel. So this would probably be a more apt comparison. They both bend a lot. And they both have that golden tone. Other than that, it's really difficult to compare them. Because they're small and short, they both have that spring back. This is probably the closest brush I have to the, this is the Kz8 AC28. It's a round brush, but size-wise and flop-wise, density-wise, it's probably the closest thing I have to compare to the Kz2. So as you can see, both flop out quite a bit. Both are cheek brushes / powder brushes. This one more so as a powder brush. Both would make fantastic bronzer brushes. As you can see, that's how much it splays out. That's how much it splays out. The Kz8 red squirrel, I cannot feel a difference from the Chikuhodo Kazan Squirrel. And then when I turn this on its side, of course, it's going to feel denser and splay out less. When I turn it on the big side, it splays out just as much. So this is I can't even call this an alternative. It's a similar brush, but this thing is heckish expensive. I got this before Kz8 increased their price. So if you were interested in the AC28 from Kz8, which is made of red squirrel, I would look into the Kz2 instead because this is something like $300 now. I got it way back when it was less expensive. And then, of course, there's the Chinese red squirrel. I only have this one luxury Chinese fude. Well, I guess you don't really call it, but this one luxury Chinese handmade makeup brush. And then the red squirrel in this, interestingly enough, feels softer than the Koyudo red squirrel. And you can see the color difference. This is, well, actually you can't really see, but this one is it's about the closest to the Kazan Squirrel, which kind of would make sense because Kazakhstan is closer to China and probably ships closer. I don't know, but I just thought I would throw this one in here. It's most similar to the Kz5, but it's a lot floppier. And I don't know why I'm spending so much time on this one because it's limited edition, but this is probably my favorite of my Chinese brush acquisitions. I don't have very many of them, so this is a nice one. If you ever find it secondhand, I would definitely consider it. And that concludes all my Kazan Squirrel and Red Squirrel brushes. Oh, for that person who was asking earlier, I did pull the soft cheek. I did pull it and reject it. So this is like Sonia G soft cheek in comparison to the Kz4. The Kz4 is flat topped, as you can see, and the Kz4 is also denser. And then the soft cheek is made of goat. So you have the same spring back with less hair. So it feels less plush on. And because it's goat, it splays out less. So, well, it covers less area. So actually, I might as well leave that in there for a review. I'll put it in. Okay, going down, starting with this one again. We have 3 brushes, none of which are identical, but some of which are close enough. This is a discontinued CG Japan Beauty powder brush. This is made of Gray Squirrel. This is their own line. I'm not sure why they discontinued it because these brushes are great. If you ever find one secondhand and you don't want to get the Kz1, this is a great one to look at. It's a paddle. It's not quite as fat, but because it's so loose like this, it makes a great finishing brush and a bronzer brush. So you can see how display is. Kz1 is a little denser, displays a little less. But this is probably the closest one I have in feeling when I run it over my face compared to the Kz1. Kz1 does feel more luxurious and more plush because denser. That's that. Then we have the EQ28. This is from Tanseido. This is Saikoho Goat, one of their softer goat hair brushes. This one has the most resilience, similar to the Kz1. However, it's much less thick. However, it is a great all-over powder brush if you aren't super sensitive and you prefer to have a tackier base that you set with powder. This would be a great brush for that. This one I don't recommend setting your powder with if you have a very tacky base because it will get gunked up quickly and will need to be washed more often. This is the Koyudo limited edition, again, white Canadian Squirrel brush. They do come up as a re-release once in a while, and the densities do differ, but Canadian Squirrel overall is much, like you can see how it's pressing into my skin as I run it all over my face, much more firm. Like you can see, no depression, yes depression, no depression, yes depression. And then part of it is because the hairs are slightly shorter and more densely packed in there without a crimped ferrule, which would splay them out more like this if it was crimped. But overall, Canadian Squirrel is much more sturdy and much more firm than Kazan Squirrel. Kazan Squirrel is, and I mentioned in the beginning, better and more firm than its Gray Squirrel and Blue Squirrel counterparts, which allow brushes to use less hair, but still have like a strong functional use for blending. But this is a very strong brush. So no real dupes in my brush collection for the KZ1 aside from the MK1 and MK2, which I covered in part 2. Okay, let's see. Now we are going to move on to these guys. For the Kz2, I have several sort of dupes, one of which is the Hakuhodo B002. Another sort of dupe is the Koyudo Kz5 Cheek Brush. This one is in the Yakusuji handle. And then sort of again in the Koyudo BP009. The closest one it is to is the Blue Squirrel B002 by Hakuhodo. But Hakuhodo, as you can see, has a much more tapered shape to it. The most similar they are is in the spread and the softness. And then as far as applying powder, these guys go, because it's translucent powder, they both mattify my face. They both seem the same to me. If I was applying blush, this would be the better choice because it is ever so slightly denser. So if you're going to use the Kz2 to apply blush, the B002 is not a suitable dupe. If you're looking to apply powder, then the B002 is a suitable dupe. Again, Kazan Squirrel, Blue Squirrel. And then the Kz5 Coho is probably the one that feels closest to the Kazan Squirrel. The gray squirrel, you can feel a little bit more texture. The Kz5 Coho is softer than Kazan Squirrel, actually. So if you run across a Kz5 Coho brush from, say, Koyudo or something, and you have the funds to spare, you'll definitely probably love Kz5 Coho. And as you can see, it's very soft. It has a very big spread. And lastly, if you're just looking for a gray squirrel powder brush again, and Hakuhodo costs too much to ship or something, Koyudo makes the BP009, which I find to be a pretty suitable dupe for the KZ2. Yes, I did say Gray Squirrel has a little bit more texture to it, but it's really in the realm of how nitpicky do you want to be. Gray Squirrel is perfectly fine, perfectly suitable. You don't need Kazan Squirrel, but it does feel really nice. And then if you like the Kazan Squirrel brushes, but you prefer a round dome powder brush, this one is probably a close one, the KZ3 to the BP009, but the BP009 is bigger. And this one is shaped and more pointed and slightly more firm. If you want a very soft powder brush that's round, the KZ series doesn't offer anything like that, so you might want to look at the BP009. And then this is the Kz3. So closest one I have, well, the closest brushes I have are all Goat, aside from the Gray Squirrel BP009. This is probably the closest I can get to duping the Kz003. Second closest would be the Hakuhodo 104. This is the S model. You can get it in the B model. Same brush head, just non-fancy ferrule and handle. Smaller and definitely less firm. Like you can see the depression it causes in my skin when I bounce them together. Depression, no depression. Depression, no depression. Much bigger splay, less of a splay. You can technically use this for highlight and blush. Technically use this for highlight and blush. Can't use it for contour really. Can't use it for contour really. So these brushes are the most similar function-wise, but the most similar feel-wise is the 009. Function-wise is the 10. No, sorry, did I say 104? This is the 103. This is the 103 pointed pounder brush. The 104 is flat top. It looks like this, but cut flat. Not cut flat, formed flat, sculpted flat. And then I have a couple other like round brushes that are completely different from the Kz3. So this is the closest I can get to duping the Kz3. This is a highlight brush again from Hakuhodo, the J5521. And not really a dupe because this one fits for contour, this one doesn't. And then this is a cheek brush. You don't really get much highlight action out of this, though they are very similar in size. This is a Kz8 EC20. And then I'll compare it to the Kz04 in a second. Just need to grab more water. Okay, everyone's favorite brush, probably. Grab some water and a chocolate chip cookie. So this is the Kz004. This is by Chikuhodo. This is a Chikuhodo RC2. As you can see, the RC2 is a little more round, a little less tapered. Or a little more round and a little less flat. So these three, the Chikuhodo T4, the Kz4, and the RCC2. But because this is goat, we're throwing it out. This is the squirrel. Gray squirrel. No, yes, gray squirrel. I almost said blue squirrel. And this is more firm and it splays out less, as you can see. More firm, less firm. More splay, less splay. And how that translates to surface area is this one has a more precise tip. This one's more flat. You get more surface area contact right away. Plus, it splays out more. You get less controllability with your blush. So let's see what that looks like when applying a blush. Let's go with this orange color. And I'm just pressing medium lightly. And you can see how much surface area it covers. Now let's do this. Grab a little bit more. There we go. As you can see, the width of the brush head affects the width and the shape of the brush head affects how much area it covers. And then because of density, naturally this is going to be the stronger blender. This is going to be a little weaker. So this would work best with a softer product like the Kz8 blush. I picked a hard blush to test the Kazan Squirrel brushes with specifically because I wanted to see if they would struggle with blending and be splotchy or not, because they are kind of not that dense. They're on like the medium light side of density compared to, say, like this would be squarely in the medium category. And that's for the Z series overall, except for the last two eye brushes. I'm gonna wash that. And I'm just wiping it off with Bioderma on a cotton pad. Oh, I think my package is here. Not brushes, not brushes. I ordered some planners because I've been planting herbs in my windowsill in cups, and I decided to move them to planners, finally. Okay, as for the other brushes I have similar to the Kz4, if you're looking for a goat version, your closest bet will be the EC20. However, this is more domed top, and it's made of goat. but they splay about the same. They feel both very soft. This is Chikuhodo, so it's definitely a high quality brush, and it's comparable to Squirrel. So if you're looking for a goat version of a round brush, and the T4 is slightly too, I guess, firm for you, the EC20 gives you a softer effect, much closer to the KZ brushes do, much closer to the KZ4. So in terms of application dupes, I would say the Kz4, EC20, and then the T4, even though it doesn't have that flattish top shape. Another brush that looks really similar but applies completely differently though. This is the Finisher Buki L310 from Stilazzi. Flat top brush, much flatter, much bigger, much firmer. Goat. So this looks similar. I pulled it simply because it looked similar, and I think it's been asked about. Yeah, someone asked me about it, which is why it's in here. So not a dupe at all, application-wise. Soft cheek, I mentioned a little earlier, because it's goat, and it's dyed goat. It's more firm, doesn't splay out as much. It's going to apply color more strongly. Let's show that right now. And it's just different. The feel of it, oops, wow, okay. The feel of it is completely different. I forgot I had all that orange blush on there. Okay. Let's balance out the other side. So because of that, okay, let's use the orange blush again to compare the Kz4 and the Sonia G Soft Cheek. What blush palette? This is the Sleek Blush by 3 in Pumpkin. So Kz4, let's start on the bottom. There, very big, very wide area of effect. Much smaller, like this compared to this. And that was just me pressing and running it up and down, back and forth, like being really messy about it. Like if you're going to apply to the face, yeah, you'd be a little more controlled about it. But if you like precise blush, Kz4 might be too big for you. And then let's compare it to the EC20. Why not? Because I'm already marking up my arm. So this is the EC20. As you can see, it applies the color a lot slower than the Sonia G Goat did, because dyed goat has more texture to it and it grabs more pigment. This is undyed Chikuhodo, so it's much softer of an effect. As you can see, this is really strong, really bold. This is almost more muted. These two are almost more muted. The KZ and the Chikuhodo from Kz8 apply it more muted. And heck with it. Let's do the T4 while we're at it. It has a lot of blush already on it. That's fine. I'll wipe it off for the most part and see how much orange I can get out of it. You can see. You can see that's goat from, that's Chikuhodo goat from Chikuhodo's Takumi series compared to the Chikuhodo goat from the Kz8. Part of the reason why the Takumi applies it so much stronger is because it's so much denser. This is much softer and more flexible. And then finally, I have another option for you if you're looking at the Kz4 and you like the shape, but you want something smaller. This is the WYC17. Yes, WYC17. Much smaller splay. And it's the same very smooth goat hair Chikuhodo goat as the EC20. And heck with it, let's do it. Since this is the brush most people are interested in, let's do all the dupes. So You can see there's a clear banding pattern here. This is the Kz4. This is the EC20. This is the, oops, nope, that's not that one. I got it wrong. Okay, let's start that over. This is the Kz4. This is the Kz4 Kazan Squirrel from Chikuhodo. This is the Sonia G Soft Cheek Dyed Goat Hair. This is the Tanseido EC20 Saikoho Goat Hair. This is the Chikuhodo Takumi T4 Saikoho Goat Hair, but denser. And this is the Tanseido WYC17 Goat Hair. So there are those. And I'm not going to bother doing a swatch with the Stellati Finishing Buki, since the only reason here is because the shape is similar. And then something about the sleek blush palette I should mention. If I'm not using a goat, if I'm using goat and not squirrel with it, I generally actually go into a translucent or light powder like this. Like I'll load up my T4 with translucent powder or this ambient powder first, then I'll dip it into the sleek blush to kind of tone it down so I don't over apply right away and get clown cheeks. So if you have a lot of very pigmented blushes and you don't want to have to be careful with them, squirrel's the way to go. Okay. And I believe I already demoed what the Kz4 looks like against the Hakuhodo Kazan Squirrel brush, the G5518. Okay. Whew, okay. Did I say the SC20? No, I forgot to compare to the SC20. Okay. Backing up a bit. I hate myself sometimes. Where did I put that brush? The Kz04. This is the alternative to the Kz04. This is the SC20. Interestingly enough, the SC20, when I apply blush, is less similar than the EC20. So even though the SC20 is gray squirrel and the EC20 is goat, the goat brush applies most like the Kz4. I don't know why that is, but that's just how it is with these brushes. Like, I'll show you right now. So this is the Kz4. Man, we are spending forever on this brush, but I figured that most people would be most interested in this brush. There's the Kz4. Here's the EC20. And then here's the SC20. So it's a little bit hard to see on camera, but you can't really see the gleam that the EC20 applies with that the SC20 lacks. Like, this is the most matte of the three swatches. The Kazan Squirrel, the Kz4, and the EC20 have a very similar, like almost like satiny gleam to it. Actually, I do know why the SC20 applies differently and more matte. It's because I mentioned Kazan Squirrel is more resilient, so it applies glitter very well and gives a nice shimmer finish to shimmery or glowy products. So you can really polish it in and make it gleam. Same for goat. That's why you get the polish and the slight gleam. However, you can't quite get that high polish with Gray Squirrel, which is why this Gray Squirrel is not as similar as the goat is to Kazan Squirrel. Okay, you can digest that for a bit. Okay. Cleaning off again. My arm's going to be orange at the end of this. Okay, we're in the home stretch. This is the Kz5, and there's actually not as many dupes for this as you might think. So the first one that my mind jumped to was the Goss Airbrush. You've got the same sort of candle shape from the side, but as you can see, and I mentioned this way in the beginning, this is dry to file brush guard. It has like a nice diamond taper. Goss is a rounded paddle. They look similar from the side, but you turn it around and you get that. Where another brush I have that does have that diamond shape is this Koyudo Sakura. This was a limited edition set, but this is what reminds me most of it from the front, but then you turn it on the side, it's like, nope, that ain't it. This one, it looks similar-ish, but not really. This brush is in here because someone requested a comparison of it because it's Canadian Squirrel and it's a cheek brush one. Anyways, that's this. Rounded square. Doesn't have that nice diamond taper. This is a Koyudo White Canadian Squirrel cheek brush. The most similar I have, and this is a little bit of a stretch, is the Koyudo BP018. This is the closest brush I have. It doesn't have that nice diamond shape, but it is the closest in thickness and density, and as you can see, similar pressures or similar actions when applied with the same pressure. This one has a thinner tip, more precise highlight. However, this one does have a nice surface for highlight as well and for contour. So most similar is the BP018. Next most similar is the Goss Airbrush, but that's already kind of a stretch. And then these two are dissimilar. They're just in here because they were requested. So, and then those are also limited edition, so it's kind of terrible to put these in here. But in case you were wondering, or in case you already had those brushes and you were wondering, can I dupe it in the Kazan series, the Homare series? No, you can't. So, I'm actually going to use this with the pressed blush. This is Colourpop from Clinique. And I'm going to use this as I would a blush brush. So there's that. And this is purely to demonstrate that you can use this with a hard pressed or a baked product. And then normally I would actually use the brush this way, but because my arm's not the same as my face, that's why I'm using it with this motion. So Gray Squirrel applies this blush stronger, but that's because this BP018 is denser than the Kz5. And finally, the airbrush. And this is the weakest one so far. The BP018 is decently strong. Like, you'd be surprised at how well it can apply color. Like, I get blown away by it every time, even though it is Gray Squirrel. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have to layer forever to get color. No, it's pretty strong. So, airbrush, BP018, Homare Kz5. I'm going to start a new cotton pad here. If you've been here from the beginning and you're still hanging in here, wow. Like I'm getting antsy just sitting here talking about them. Okay. This guy, the Kz6. Again, no real dupes for it. The closest ones I can come up with is the shadow base from Kevin Aquan. This is Goat, but you can see big fluffy chisel paddle shape. The WQ12 from Kz8, again big brush, slightly bigger, more shaped. The Koyudo BPO29, more tapered. So this is going to apply a lot more like the Koyudo, like the Chikuhodo Z5. Pull that one out for a comparison again for swatches. Somewhere in here. I know it's somewhere in here. Okay, so I'll do swatches with all these brushes again. This one, because someone asked about it, the Hakuhodo, geez, what are you? This is the Hakuhodo J127. Similar shape, slightly smaller. Again, more chiseled. And, well, someone asked about this too. So that's why this is in here. It's another big eye brush and one that I talk about frequently. So that's the only reason why this is in here. So let's get to swatching with these brushes. And I'm trying to decide if I want to do it with the Urban Decay eyeshadow again or one of the VCR eyeshadows. So let's do it with the VCR. We're going to use this purple color. No, let's use copper. So copper color, let's go. And then apply like that. Let's make sure I keep these brushes in order. This is the Homare. This is the Chikuhodo. And what I'm doing is I'm dabbing once, twice on each side. That's how I'm doing this. And then this is stronger simply because this is denser. Let's do, so Homare, Kz6, Chikuhodo, Z5, and then that was Kazan Squirrel, Gray Squirrel. We're going to use another Gray Squirrel, and this is Koyudo BPO29. I'm going to think about that for a second. There's that. And then this is less dense than the Z5, which is why you get a finish more similar to the Kazan Squirrel. And as I mentioned with the Goat brushes earlier, Kazan Squirrel is more like resilient, which is why you get a glossier finish with this gloss. You get more of the shimmer in the final product with the Kazan Squirrel compared to the Gray Squirrel. Like this, you get more of the base color. With Gray Squirrel, with Kazan Squirrel, you get more of the shimmer and the glitter. It's not glitter, but let's just call it glitter. This is the WQ12. And then this one applies pretty weakly because it's very thin in comparison. There's that. And then we'll do the Hakuhodo GS1. So there's that. Finish-wise, Canadian Squirrel offers the most comparable finish to Kazan Squirrel. But if you're looking at the brushes from a shape-wise things, these are completely not the same shape. They just achieve the same finish with application. This is Horse, and I'm running out of space, so we'll do it up here. Because this horse is so strong, it just kind of blends it out and gets rid of the shimmer. So make sure I put that in the right order, and we're gonna skip the Kevin Kwan base and shadow simply because it is just so different. I use this as a contour brush, and clearly I would never use this as a contour brush. So this is Hakuhodo Horse, what are you? J127 up here. This is the, let's do this. Hakuhodo J127 Horse. Homare Kz6. Chikuhodo 5, Z5. Koyudo BP029. Tanseido WQ12. And then the Hakuhodo WS1. So we'll try to line those up so you can see the finish. And that concludes the large eye brush. I'm gonna have a heck of a brush washing session after this one. Maybe I'll do a live stream tomorrow. Watch me wash my brushes. Join me so I don't get bored. Keep me company so I don't know, gouge my eyes out. Okay. Whew. I'm going to look at the comments a bit. Okay, what do you use to wash your brushes? What soap do you use? Initial wash before use, because like that you shouldn't use your brushes straight out of the package. Yeah, I agree. You shouldn't use your brushes straight out of the package because you won't get the like real shape of the brush. But yeah. As far as shouldn't wash your brushes, there shouldn't, and then shouldn't wash them too often. Yeah, Kazan Squirrel is definitely great for eyeshadows. Like, and then as you just saw there, Kazan Squirrel gives a very different finish, offers a very different finish from Gray Squirrel. Just wash with water, no soap for the initial use. Oh yes, yeah, about that, yes. No soap for the initial use, yeah. Like, because it's not necessary. You can wash it with soap if you want, especially if you wash it with something like a shampoo that might help kind of get rid of the squirrely smell. Otherwise, it might be kind of strong. But yeah, you don't need to wash it with soap for the first one. But I can't think of why you shouldn't wash it with soap for the first use. All right. Now we got the Kz7. I'm just going to lay these all out onto my brush bar. I forgot I had my brush bar somehow. Okay. Second to last, the Kz7. So we've got the Chikuhodo GSN9, the G4, the Hakuhodo G5523, the Hakuhodo GS5, and the MAC 217. So with, wait, is it the GS5 or GS2? Some of those brushes I use so much that I should know the name, but I don't. That's the GS5. I labeled it wrong on my spreadsheet. Okay, let's go change that right now. So, Kazan Squirrel, Gray Squirrel, Blue Squirrel, Gray Squirrel, Blue Squirrel, Canadian Squirrel, MAC 217, and there's Goat because someone wanted to know, but does MAC even make their brushes in Goat anymore? I don't know. Anyways, size-wise, as you can see, kind of about the same, except for once you get back here, this one's the Hakuhodo GS5 is ever so slightly wider. But let's just do the swatching because that will give you the clearest picture. So I'm going to swatch them flat and swatch them with the tip. And for this one, I'm going to use a loose pigment, and I'm using a, well, kind of loose pressed pigment. Pressed loose pigment. There we go. Because these are denser, more compact brushes, and they do handle this just fine. This is one of the L'Oreal Infallible shadows. I should have started higher up on my arm. Oh well. That's there. And that's there. You can see both have a similar shape. I wouldn't be surprised if Chikuhodo duped their own shape. Similar densities as well. I forgot myself for a second and started doing a dot there. That's the GSN9. This is the G4. You know, I see that where the Kazan Squirrel is stronger because that line it gives is darker. That's the Hakuhodo G5523. Hakuhodo GS5. And then the MAC 217 just because I'm going to put it on the top because I ran out of space. So here we are. So from left to right, top to bottom, that's what these swatch like. As you can see, the darkest come from the Hakuhodo GS5, which is Canadian Squirrel, and the Kazan Squirrel Kz7. Finally, pencil brushes. I don't have any pencil brushes that are Canadian Squirrel. I only have pencil brushes that are Goat or Gray Squirrel. So what I have for you is, well, aside from the Kz8 itself, is the Chikuhodo Z10, the Koyudo Cherry Birch Medium Eye Brush, And then the Ray Morris number 8. This is Gray Squirrel. This is Psychoho. This is Gray Squirrel. And this, of course, is Kazan Squirrel. So, no cleaning. Because I use this pencil brush mostly for an inner corner highlight. I'm going to use it with a shiny light shadow. This is the MAC Extra Dimension in Lorelei. And then this is a harder, I believe it's baked formula, but it's one of those gel powder hybrids that can be a little bit tricky to pick up. So let's start here. Okay, maybe that wasn't the best idea. And switching gears, different color, let's go. We're going to do purple because that shows up much better on camera. Going to go into the Viseart dark purple here. Oh yes, that's much better. Here. That's the Kz1. Going to use the Z10. Now the Koyudo BP, no, not Koyudo BP, shoot. The Koyudo Cherry Birch medium. And finally the Ray Morris number 8 point shader Gray Squirrel. So on camera, it's not really reflecting what I see accurately. This is actually stronger colored in person than this. The reason why it looks lighter in camera is because there's more sparkles and pigment on it. These have picked up a lot more of the base color. Like the Goat by the Koyudo Cherry Birch medium definitely is the strongest and the most pigmented line. But this one is the shiniest, the gleamiest by far, the Kz8 application. So, and in the Ray Morris point shader, I kind of expected it to be this strong because it's quite dense in comparison. And because, well, if you just look at the difference, there's a lot more surface area here. So, which means a lot more pigment picked up and distributed, hence our darker line. So, I'm actually not sure this is sold anymore. So again, the Kazan Squirrel will give you the gleamiest finish. So you can't really tell with crappy lighting and crappy web camera. And that is it. If you made it through all 3 parts, congratulations. I can't believe you're still here. I probably will have bored myself to death. And if you're watching this and you missed the beginning, feel free to scrub around and watch it on like twice the speed until you get to the brushes that you want to see, and look out for those. So, oh, it has been discontinued. Yeah, I realized as I was pulling out brushes for this video that a lot of them have been discontinued, but I know they occasionally pop up on the secondhand market once in a while. So, hey. Or people already have those brushes and they wonder, can I like skip getting these new brushes? And the answer most of the time is yes. Yes, you can. But are these nice to have? Are the Homare Honor Series, KZ series nice to have? Yes, they absolutely are. So I'm gonna just clean up a bit, leave the camera on, see if a couple more questions come in, and then answer them, then hop off because I have been sitting for 2.5 hours and I'm like ready to jump out of my chair. And I haven't had any food yet, so I'm probably gonna grab a chocolate chip cookie. Whew. I hope also like with this video you're able to like get a lot more information than just about the Homare series themselves. Like it was almost partially about the Takumi series and Z series and MK series too. You're welcome. I really like appreciate expressions of like appreciation. Like you have no idea how much it means to me, and like validation shouldn't come from other people, but it validates me and it makes me like happy to make more videos. There's all that psychological stuff about like validation should come from within, but then I'm thinking, but it's nice when people tell me that stuff I do is nice or stuff I do is helpful. I'm gonna have a heck of a lot of brushes to wash. Brush holder again. 1 second. Give me 1 second on that. I have a handful of brushes right now that I don't particularly want to just drop on the table. Okay. Brush holder. This is the brush bar. It doesn't. Oh, here it is. Is that backwards? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's backwards. Kit Plus Hooks makes it. I saw in another pro YouTuber's video. I don't remember who, but I saw him using it. I'm like, oh, I gotta have that. So I have 2 of these. You usually see only one of them because I'm using it to display the brushes. So we've got these little silicone flower things. Oh, jeez. That like move and allow you to put your brushes in. Brush washing stream. We'll see if that actually happens. I was kind of half joking. I'm probably not going to wash all of them, just most of them. Yeah. So there are some really big brushes that you can't fit in, like the Koyudo Fuwa, but like otherwise big brushes like this stick in fine. The brushes that do not work and play so well with this are the ones like the Hakuhodo S series because of that chiseled thing. It's like, you see that lean? Because it doesn't have as much to grip onto, it like kind of doesn't work as well, but I mean, it still stays in there, but you can see it like it's worked its way loose because of that chip on the bottom, as opposed to this because it's even all the way around and there's enough friction to hold it 360. It doesn't wiggle out. I guess I should get a good microphone and do brush washing ASMR, huh? Okay, and there's something calming about water too. Like I understand that aspect of it. Whew, okay. Water is nice. Water is very nice. Water is very, very nice, as I keep having to remind myself. And it's also summer here, and I have the fan on. I'm not coughing because of Corona, I promise. I'm coughing because the water went down wrong. So like I have the fans running, so I'm like getting super dehydrated without realizing it. Yes, you, Christy on IG. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say like you. Hi, I'm really glad to see you here. Yeah, I quoted your blog post about Kazan Squirrel, the one you wrote about Hakuhodo, the 3 brushes, and I put the, what's it called? The link in my script thing. Let me pull out the Kz1. Did you want to see the Kz2 in Kz1 in comparison to the Kz2 as well, or like in comparison to any of the other Chikuhodo brushes? Okay, so this is in part 2, like way somewhere in the beginning of the video, but the Kz1 is most similar to the MK1 and MK2. I don't know if you agree with me or disagree, but I think the MK1 and MK2 are the same brush. They're both this fat, fluffy paddle. It's about the same size, about the same spread. The Kz1 is slightly less dense than the MK1 to my feeling. So the MK1 and MK2 are the closest you're going to get to the Kz, the closest you're going to get to the Kz1. Kz is ever so slightly longer, but because it's denser, this still feels looser. With regards to the Z9 is definitely firmer, definitely longer, definitely more shaped. Just going to exclude the Z1 because that's round and it's also more firm. And then the MKMO is slightly smaller, not as fluffy, not as big, and the MKMO is definitely more firm. So these guys I would use for bronzer all day long. Yep, I have the Z series as well. And then if you're interested in what's it called, section 2, I do comparative swatches of the Kz to their Z series and Takumi series analogs. So like, for example, this one, the Kz1, I compared bronzer swatches with the MK2. The Kz4, I did a comparative swatch with the T4 because they're similar. The Kz5 I did in comparison with the T5. The Kz3, I still did a comparison with the Z2 simply because they're both that flame-shaped candle brush, but I also explained that they're pretty much non-comparable because their size difference is so great. So yeah, that's where that stands. Absolute massacre of brushes here. All right. Well, that's what the replay is for, right? So yeah, and then of course I'll be answering questions in the comments and then on Instagram as well. And I'll get to finishing all the links for all the brushes in that script. So if you're interested in any of the analogs or comparative dupe brushes I mentioned, then you can go buy those instead of the Homare if you aren't terribly interested in what I said about the Kazan squirrels here. All right, bye. Thank you for watching, everybody.